So here's my take on the secondary situation on these Q-Jets anyhow. I personally don't put the choke diaphragm back on that hooks to the secondary butterfly, and there's a reason for that, because your carburetor runs on vacuum. Basically, when you're cruising down the road and you're just cruising along, you got 18 inches, give or take, of vacuum in your engine. When you floor it, your vacuum drops to 3 pounds, inches of vacuum, not pounds, but 3 or 4 inches of vacuum. So that's how your power piston works in your primary metering needles. You'll have, like, say, a 7-inch spring in there, not long, but a vacuum. It's in vacuum. You'll have, say a number 7 spring in there. So when you're cruising along at 18, you floor it and your vacuum drops. It drops to 15, 13, 12, 10, 9. When it gets to 8, that spring overcomes the vacuum because it's dropped so much, so it lifts the primary metering needle from the fat part of the needle to the skinny part of the needle. So now you got more gas going around through the needle, through the jet. But anyhow, the same thing happens on your secondaries with these vacuums here, man. This rod hooks up over here, like I said. So when you're cruising along, this is sucked in, the vacuum. And then when you floor it and your vacuum drops, this releases, which for intent and purpose is supposed to allow these to open on up, but it just seems like it never opens them up all the way. I've worked on countless of these Q-Jets, and I've worked on a buttload of them. I've seen ones that barely open this far from the manufacturer. I mean, and that's just all the way to the floor, and it's stroking it on the accelerator end. It's just not, it's not. This here keeps it from opening up. It's what happens, because when you floor it and the vacuum drops, this comes on open some. Well, as your vacuum increases then with your RPM and you come in the other direction, then that pulls these back shut. So what happens? So now you're running down the road and they're just barely open at all. This is what meters the gas for your secondaries. So when you take this off right here, there's actually a little screw on the side. I've seen a couple guys talk about it on their YouTube clips. There's that little screw right there you can see. Underneath that, on the very bottom, you can't see it real well, but there's a little Allen screw, little Allen head screw right there. That Allen screw is what keeps tension on this screw here. This screw up here has a spring on it, and the spring is what makes these come back shut. So what I do is I take this off. I've messed with these for 35, almost like 38 years I've been running these. And back in the day, they'd say to drill a little hole on the side of the vacuum can, and that'd keep them from sucking back shut or make them shut back slower. That didn't work. It seems like even just the resistance and the weight and drag of the rod being hooked into here keeps them from functioning properly as far as keeping them open. I mean, and that's what's wrong with them as far as I'm concerned from the manufacturer. They shut themselves back down on the secondaries. So anyhow, I leave that off. I just did this one for somebody else and just redid mine too. It hadn't been gone through for about 20 years, and I hadn't jetted it for altitude and stuff either. Pulled it off a 400, put it on a 350, but set these up pretty tight, and the people are right on the YouTube clips that I've seen. Once you do that, if you floor it all the way, this is the secondary part of the throttle plate. If you floor it all the way from a dead stop, these will dip and it'll bog a little bit. Well, don't drive it that way. You don't have to stick it all the way to the floor. Stab 90% of them primaries. You can feel the secondary spring back here. It's twice as, maybe 3 times as stiff as the first primary part. When you get to it. I've driven them for decades, so I know how far I can stroke it. Just stab 90% of them primaries and give it a couple seconds to suck all that down. And then dump them the rest of the way. And these will dump all the way now, and they'll just hang open. Pow! It'll just keep pulling. It'll pull until you either lift your foot and shift or you blow your stuff up. I've blown a couple of them up because it just kept pulling. But just you don't got to floor them all the way. I've only been around a couple of motors that were beefy enough to where they could accept everything from an idle full wide open anyhow. So just get the hang of dumping at 90%, give it a second or two to accept the gas. You just flush through it and then stab them suckers, and these will dump every time. They'll dump all the way open, and they'll stay open until you let up and shut the throttle plate part of it. But that's how I've ran them anyhow for about 38 years. I've had awesome luck. I've killed I don't know how many 390s with a little 307 that was stock, just a Q-jet and some headers, and that was it. I ate a lot of cars with that little 307. My first car was a cat shit green 4-door Chevy Impala with a 350. Man, once I figured this out, I had a guy show me at a party one night when I was 16 years old. I just put the 4-barrel on there because it only had a 2-barrel. And this guy was like, hey, I'll show you how to make those run. And he came out and took the rod here that connects to the butterflies. He pulled out a knife, or not a knife, but a pair of dikes that he had in his pocket, and he just cut the damn thing. I was kind of looking at my buddy going, oh shit, man, I hope this guy knows what he's doing. But ever since then, we went out when we left the party and dumped them, and it just, that old cat shit green Impala 4-door, it just stand up and broil them in first gear that way. Whoop! Just amazing. But from the factory, literally, I've seen ones that only open this far, floor it all the way, 4,800 RPM. That's all you're getting out of them. Take that off, let them dump all the way. The only problem you'll run into there, and that's what I just told this guy, is I pulled the filter out of here. Don't put them filters in there, the paper or even the stone ones. The stone ones seem worse than the paper one. Just run a good inline filter. And I'm talking like one of them glass tubed ones. Those work great and they filter excellent. I've never had any problems with those. I've had problems with the paper filters. Little pieces of rust and stuff will tear through them, get caught in the needle and seat. But the reason I'm saying don't run that little stone or the little filter in there is because it restricts the gas flow a little bit. Once you start dumping these wide open, you're almost starving that bowl now inside there. You got to have your fuel pump. It has to be working right, and stuff has to be spot on, or you'll suck the bowl dry because these are hanging open so far now. But anyhow, that's my take on them. You can always adjust the hangers. The hangers have a letter stamped on them. They'll be A to Z. If I remember right, A is richer, Z is leaner. And that determines how far the holes that the needles hang on down in here are on the hanger. One way or another, the holes are up or down on that, and it pulls them up out of the needle or the jet farther or not. So you can adjust your calibration off that, plus you can adjust the secondary metering needles themselves if you want to alter the fuel mixture there. But anyhow, that's my take on it. It's worked great for me for 38 years. I've had a blast. I don't know how many times I've done that for people. And I always ask them when I'm done, you want the rod back on? And they're like, screw you, man. You can throw that out the window right now. Just learn to drive them different. Just learn to drive them different. Don't floor them all the way. Give them 90% of them primaries. Wait a couple seconds for it to take that and dump them babies open. It'll snap your tires right up. Wah! So anyhow, everybody be safe. That's my opinion on it.